Hello, I'm Roger Baker, Director of the Stratfor Center for Applied Geopolitics at RANE. This podcast is brought to you by RANE Worldview, the premier digital publication for objective geopolitical intelligence and analysis. Subscribe today at raneworldview.com.
This is the Essential Geopolitics podcast from RANE, where we focus on current geopolitical developments, emphasizing their future trends and effects. Welcome aboard, I'm Emily Donahue. Today we're discussing U.S. trade policy towards China. Here with analysis is Matthew Bay, RANE's Senior Global Analyst. Thanks for being here, Matthew. I know how busy you are.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Let's talk about China trade tariffs. I know there's been discussion about tariff relief for China, but what exactly is the White House considering?
Yeah, so the White House really right now is looking at the ways that it can tackle inflation. Of course, U.S. inflation is now at 40-year highs. It's over 8%. It's a major political liability for the Biden administration and the Democratic Party ahead of November midterms. They have a number of options that they can do. The question is really the scope of that. One of the things that has recently surfaced as seeming to be the most likely outcome is that the U.S. will essentially suspend some of the tariffs that are covering mainly consumer goods, and they're talking about really a small list of goods that would entail about $10 billion worth of trade. While that sounds like a lot, that's actually small when you consider that the Trump administration put into place new tariffs on roughly $370 billion worth of trade. So we're talking about essentially 3% or less, if we go with the 10 billion route. However, last month we did hear rumors that the administration was also considering proposals to do more substantial tariff relief. Right now, the U.S. is in the process of reviewing tariffs on about $50 billion worth of goods. Those were the first tranche that President Trump put into place in 2018. And the administration, at least, has considered in the past lifting all of the tariffs that were put on top of that original $50 billion, so basically scaling them back down to $50 billion worth of imports. Now, we probably don't have a final decision on this. I assume the Biden administration is going to be continuing to debate it. Other options that the administration has beyond just lifting tariffs or modifying them, reducing them, things like that, is the U.S. can expand the exclusion process. So basically that is a process where importers can go to the U.S. government and basically say, hey, look, China is the only source of imports of this material. We can't get it from anybody else. We can't produce it here in the United States. Please exclude us from the tariffs. The Biden administration has recently reopened that exclusion process, but at a very narrow level. It is possible that they can expand the scope of that.
Given the anti-China sentiment on Capitol Hill, are there any political repercussions that could happen if tariff relief were put in place?
Yeah, the Biden administration really is in a pickle when it comes to what to do here. While, yes, on one hand, it really does want to curb inflation, most of the estimates are, even if the U.S. removes all the tariffs, we're talking about, at most, a one-off 1 percentage point reduction in U.S. inflation. That's when it's at 8.4%. So it's not a lot. But on the other hand, given the bipartisan opposition to China, and everybody in Washington is seemingly want to out anti-China, all the other parties, any kind of tariff relief for China will be construed, or at least open up the door for political rivals to say that Biden and, by extension, the Democrats are being weak on China, not as tough as the Trump administration, all of these things ahead of midterms. So it does open up this liability. Now, to offset that, the Biden administration is likely to announce a new Section 301 investigation. This is a trade investigation, the same powers that the Trump administration did to underpin the tariffs in the first place. But it would open up a new Section 301 investigation specifically on China's subsidies for strategic industries. By doing that, the Biden administration would essentially be retaining the option to modify and expand tariffs down the road. Those investigations will not be concluded very quickly. It will take a year or so to go through the motions of that. But once they do, it does at least give the opportunity for the Biden administration to come around and say, hey, look, we are starting this new investigation. At some point, once we have the results, then we'll look at, trade remedies as well as other measures to implement against China.
So, we're very close to midterms. Would those bring any changes to Biden's policy towards China on trade-related issues?
So I think the Biden administration will at least not be under the gun when it comes to really thinking about the political ramifications in terms of votes after the midterm. So it'll be 2 years until we have the next election cycle here in the United States. So it does give the Biden administration more room to be flexible when it comes to things like suspending tariffs and such like that. So I think it opens up their options to perhaps go beyond. If we have this month, for example, the announcement of the lifting or suspension of tariffs of goods worth $10 billion, they have the opportunity to expand that. Now, that being said, if we just look at potential outcome of the election, it's very possible that the Biden administration loses control of both houses of Congress. The House of Representatives is going to be very difficult for Democrats to retain. The Senate looks more like a toss-up. But if the Republicans do gain both houses of Congress, they will be pushing for more measures against China through the legislative process. That will require the Biden administration to be putting into place, a policy position on the proposals that the Republicans make. Now, generally in the U.S., the Republicans are more free trade than the Democrats. But given how, President Trump, when he was in office, kind of flipped that on its head by pushing the Republican Party to become more protectionist, it remains to be seen exactly what they're pushing for. For example, are they pushing more on technology-related issues, which does actually fall in line with the possibility of a new Section 301 investigation, or are they looking at, enforcing and maintaining the existing tariffs because they are, viewed by, presumably, if the Republicans gain control of the White House, you would have presumably a much more aligned Congress with former President Trump. When it comes to those Republicans, maybe they will look to, protect his trade policy with some of the review processes.
Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you.
Matthew Bay is RANE's senior global analyst. His work appears in RANE Worldview, where you can stay ahead of the news on China. Subscribe today for an insanely low price. Visit RANEworldview.com for details. That's RANE worldview.com. I'm Emily Donahue. Thanks for listening.